Hello, Mr. Chris Garrity.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. How are you?
How we doing?
Very, very well.
Good.
Enjoying the beautiful days.
Indeed. What you got cooking for the rest of summer? Anything?
Oh, just little politics, little Marwood. I'll take a few trips, but mostly here.
Got it.
Yeah, no, nothing big. And enjoying village living. So
Summer here has been beautiful, hasn't it?
yes.
It's nice, been nice. It's nice and cool. I like that. And yeah, it's pretty good. I believe Andrea's back, correct?
I believe she is. She should be on this call, I think.
Yep. And I think Ira said he was going to be on it.
Okay, good.
How was the POCD?
It was good. I've got the report right in front of me, so I can tell you how that went, and it was good. It's very informative, actually, and some of the work that we're doing, well, I guess a lot of the work that we're doing, could be incorporated into their report. So I'll tell you what I told them or what they suggested to me, actually.
Oh, good. What kind of teeth do they have? Because it's planning and zoning, and it just seems to me, having really been intimate and around planning and zoning for years, I see them looking at applications through the eyes of the plan of development, but I don't see much more than that. I don't see, and I don't know if that's even under their purview to actually advocate for the planning steps and stages. I don't know.
From what I gathered, yeah, I mean, there's no teeth in the sense that there's no enforcement of what they're proposing, what they're writing, what they're recommending, but this gives a good snapshot of what many townspeople would like to see here in town. There was definitely some surveys done, and they have a consultant they've been working with. And this report will go to the Board of Selectmen, and Board of Selectmen can do with it what it will. But it was very interesting to me reading my very first POCD, and it got me thinking about the town in a couple of different ways, which I'll explain tonight, I think, assuming we get folks. Okay. But I think what we've been doing. Oh, here's Ira. He is in. But what we've been doing is. Should be included, I believe. So,
okay.
Hello, Ira.
Hi.
Hello. And just so you all know, this is being recorded. As soon as I got on, I started recording. So I am the host and not Joyce tonight. So.
And to make it official, we'll start the meeting at 7:34. And minutes from last meeting. Any comments, questions, concerns? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Okay, so just getting into Ira, just to catch you up, we've sort of just started to sketch out and outline what we think and want from the trooper and the trooper program, and beyond the trooper and the trooper program, really the overarching concept of enforcement. Sure. Enforcement of the laws that DOT have with respect to speeding, parking, and then beyond that, our wish list of, if indeed we so wish it, to try to establish some sort of control or concept or noise ordinance, or adopt something like that. So that's really where we are. We're basically using the outline that we used at the last, last forum. Let's. I can either share this document, or we can just go into, everybody can go into their own documents, however you guys wish. Where is this? Don't loop rescue, there it is here. That's just the, where is that? See if I can't just pull that up. Board of Selectmen. Their shared folder.
Andrea is here.
You got it? Can you see that?
No, I think if we share this, then I think I've got to make you the host, I believe. And
Really?
I think
Okay,
so.
well, you can just do it here. How about this? Can everyone see this?
Oh, hold on. We can.
Okay, so two things. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, sorry, we had a frantic bedtime.
That's all right. I've had those many times in my life. And some with my kids even. Okay, just want to call to our attention the letter we received. Did everyone get this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and this was from Barbara Backrack and Catherine Backrack, and it basically outlines some of the things that she had come across during her time on the Streetscape Committee. And I think some of this was, I think, pretty interesting, and some of it's gone over. I don't think, well, she recommends that we meet with DOT. I don't think she understands that that's something we wanted to do, but just couldn't or weren't able to do, and let the selectmen do it. But I did like her last comment about what was it? The rumble strips, I thought was in item number 5. So you see, during a public meeting conducted by First Committee, many residents suggested speed bumps. However, slowing traffic DOT wouldn't support. Recent trip to Pennsylvania, she noticed rumble strips being used on secondary routes similar to Route 7 341. So I think that that's something that maybe we can talk about in terms of enforcement, because it's an enforcement of slowing down. It's not under the jurisdiction of the police, but it's certainly DOT. So did anyone else pull out anything here that was of interest or note for them?
As far as the rumble strips, it was something that the people who lived on the edge of town specifically asked not to have because it would be very loud.
Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking if I were to think it, it would be more of the approach to town, like, so, the 4 ways into town, to remind people to, once they hit the rumble strip, say at Scotticoke or down on the fields on South on Route 7, or just as you come north town the other way, or in front of the firehouse, as an example, that's going to be away from people who live residentially, but hopefully be enough to make people aware.
Gotcha.
That's one of the tools they use, and they call them traffic calming, and they can be pretty effective.
Okay, so yeah, I think if we could, I thought that was an interesting point by her, by Catherine, and appreciate that. And then the thing I just want to sort of pull up is, I just loaded up this same sort of preamble as we had before, in the same format, and then just went into recommendations, observation, and rationale. So if everyone can at some point take a look at this, add to it, subtract from it, embellish on it, or I think that this would be good. But just to hit the highlights, we're talking about the contract, the speed enforcement, and then I think we were talking about patrol coverage, whether it's Main Street and how we're going to do that. and then again, noise. And, it's a pretty broad category. What's lacking from this is backup and data. And I don't know if we can get, and we talked about this last time, some sort of report on whether, I know intuitively, and I've been told by those in the police department that there've been reduced traffic stops for speeding specifically.
Who's asking for that? Is that DOT asking for that?
No, this would be for us to use, if we could get that data and basically say, it back up the thought that we have that there is there are fewer traffic stops.
So it's an interesting approach, because whether the traffic stops have gone down or not, and certainly law enforcement tells you, Chris, and me and everybody else firsthand that they are more reluctant to pull people over for whatever reasons. Whatever the previous level was, we had the same problem. So I'm not sure that, so it wasn't there. We would have need to increase from whatever the previous level was, let alone if there was a reduction. So it sounds like we just need a net increase in enforcement.
How could we get it? I don't see a net increase if indeed we're being told that they actually have slowed on that. Getting a baseline, I hear you. I'm going to say they had 500 stops in Kent 5 years ago, and now they have 250 stops.
Well, I think, but the same problem existed, say, when they did the 500 stops, we would have had to increase to, the idea would have been to increase from whatever number it was in order to get to the level of safety and reduction of noise we're talking about. So whether they've reduced it or it still requires them to increase.
Yep.
Or am I I might be on the wrong path there, but.
Well, I just don't, I don't, it would be nice to know if you could graph out over the last 5 years what their traffic stop patterns have been in terms of numbers. That's, I guess, that would likely indicate the conclusion that, or at least the belief that I'm under, or the impression I'm under, that traffic stops have decreased. I would agree with you, even when they were higher 5 years ago, if indeed that the data were to prove that, it still wasn't enough.
Right, that's all I'm saying. So,
and I hear you there.
The troop has always been problematic, but we could try.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see if I can find that traffic stuff. And I have, as I mentioned, talked to Kent School, and they are willing to talk and sort of in public and with a letter to reinforce their concerns about enforcement, speeding, and that kind of thing. I put in there letters or commentary from businesses in town, service providers, churches, schools, regarding the noise and the parking and the speed. And I think that would be appropriate. And I can go and try to see if there's anyone that's willing to go on record for that, because I think that's important for people to understand. Not people, the Board of Selectmen, to understand that there are concerns from business owners and from other entities in town who are front the village streets. Does anyone know of any other in item number 4 copies, any town ordinances on noise? Ira, have you found any of those?
So I don't know about those specifically. I do know that, for instance, and almost ironically, the town of Litchfield for many years did an enforcement in the beginning and in the middle of the summer, around the big holidays, of course, sometimes the week before, with regard to traffic and noise And their concentration, and they would tell you quite honestly, was for noise and just bad behavior, which often included two-wheel vehicles. And they would do this enforcement every single year. Now that has changed, and I don't know that they do it anymore, but they were simply, my point is, they were simply using the current laws on the books, the current regs, which are really may be enough. The issue is how, if we choose to ask them to be enforced.
Okay, so if you could, Ira, either do both, find to see if any other towns are using any specific ordinances,
Okay.
and then secondly, or maybe firstly, to find out what the state laws are on it. And
Yep.
then on a secondary level, are towns passing any ordinances specifically to address it? At which point, if we have those, both those, we can present those. First, we can look at them and see how they apply to our town, I would think, right, guys?
Yep.
And then see if that's something that we might recommend as another element of enforcement. And I think noise is not just, as we've said before, it's not just the motorcycles.
It's everything.
There were a bunch of zip cars that went by. There's some loud music. There are these trucks. There's quite a bit of noise that emanates from all different sources. So, and I think that if we're going to be fair to everybody, we're going to have to ask that enforcement be done on a decimal level or whatever the criteria base is, and not on a specific vehicle type, or whatever.
You make a really good point. I think that's really, really important, in that this is nothing to do with any particular population or type of vehicle. This is simply who's making the noise that's extreme, and let's enforce it.
Yep. There's a pickup truck with a V8 engine that passes my house at 9:30 every night, very, very fast and very, very loudly.
Which is another thing I didn't put in here, but I think we need to talk about off-hour enforcement. We're all sensitive, I believe we are all sensitive to the normal hubbub during the weekends, primarily, and the weekends of good weather, and the weekends during good weather and vacation time, summer, fall. There are people that go by, and as Andrea said, specifically all the time, who just don't get it. Now, again, I would say 90% of the people are mindless or thoughtless, and not really malicious in their intent, but I don't think that they understand their effectiveness on this. And those are the people we need to have reminded as well. I would argue that you ticket 2 or 3 people in town who live in town, and that word gets around pretty quickly, more so than somebody being ticketed from, I'm going to make it up, Norwalk, who gets through Kent once every 6 months.
The agnostic approach is definitely the way to go. Last night, walking downtown, crossing the street with a friend of mine at about 11:15, there wasn't a car in sight for many, many minutes. And as we stepped out into the roadway, a car blew the light, not yellow, but red, heading north, and probably went by us in the area of, and I'm not a bad estimate of speed, 65 miles an hour. And there's no need to understand their intent, whether they're being mindless or not. It would be good if we could find some enforcement action for people like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because the street was empty, it really stood out.
Yeah. All right, so those were my thoughts. Anyone have any additions or expounding on that, or other thoughts that we can do? What I do want to get before we jump in, I do want to get round back to Glenn, because he went to the Planet Conservation and Development meeting, and I would like to hear that and how that dovetails to us. But prior to that, Andrea, you were going to say something?
I'm just looking at number 2, letter from Kent School. So I just, the last meeting that I was in attendance, there was some question about which schools were helping subsidize this trooper program, and is it Kent School and South Kent School both?
Initially, my understanding is, and I know that initially there were 3 participants and all were private schools. Kent, Marvelwood, and South Kent all participated financially in the first and maybe even the second iteration of the trooper contract when we brought this back. And that was an impetus for the town to take it on. Over time, because the contract, I think, is in 2-3-year segments, or maybe 2-year segments, but I think they're 3 years. It is Kent School has I think the only one of record who has participated, as Marvelwood and South Kent have elected not to. And I think
Well, at least-
Marvelwood and
South Kent might be still there, actually. I think.
oh, is it?
so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I stand corrected. So
So
there,
we should clarify that and also get them to also write a letter.
Yep.
And
I'll-
just looking at where, I mean, I know they're down in South Kent by Bulls Bridge, and there was some discussion of like what the needs are down there and how it relates or doesn't relate to what the main needs are in the village up on Main Street, but I think it's still important and we want everyone's buy-in. And also having information from Marvelwood, even if they're not giving money, they are still a large component of people who live and work in town, and that's part of keeping their student and faculty staff safe too, and maybe understanding more about why they stopped giving money could give us some insight too about what they need and from the trooper program, or what they feel like they're not getting from the trooper program as far as enforcement. And would that help us in our push for a different contract, you know?
Agree. It makes sense, and I'll work on all 3 schools to do that.
Here's a question for all of you in terms of that. Do we know of other towns where nonprofits or other groups actually pitch in for the trooper program? Or is, Kent, South Kent, and Marvelwood, is this kind of an outlier?
Well, it may be, if I could just speak to that, knowing a little about what goes on up north. A lot of these schools, or some of these schools, participate in a variety of ways, maybe not as specifically as what we're talking about, but for instance, you have schools that will donate very large sums of money for fire protection, and therefore allowing the towns to move monies into, say, traffic enforcement. So I think a lot of these schools you'll find are participating on some level. Now, that's not always easy for a private school, but certainly there are plenty of them that do.
Yeah, and if it's schools or other entities, I mean, that would be good for us to know moving forward, because especially after what I'm going to tell both all of you here, what I've discovered about funding and money.
So why don't we go into that?
Okay, so let's do the first thing. Actually, I'll tell you about the POCD meeting I attended before, and that was very interesting. I enjoyed that quite a bit. It was informational for the town, and it was broken up into large chapters, basically sustainability, community assets, development, and infrastructure. And it just talks about a variety of things about the town. What came to well, everything that was talked about the village center, the village district, as they called it, was of interest to me, especially living here, but also for this committee. And on page 84 of this report, it's part of infrastructure. It's 5.2. It's manage roadway circulation. So provide a safe and efficient vehicular transportation network that meets the needs of the community. It just talked about a few choke points. It talked about a few, talked about state highways versus the town roads. It talked about, it definitely talked about the intersection of Route 7, 341, and it was mostly about how much traffic, guardrails. It wasn't so much about speed limits, mile per hour, and definitely enforcement, what we're talking about tonight. But when I brought this up to the committee, I said, I'm on noise and traffic. We've been talking about this. I think a lot of what we've been talking about should be incorporated in this report of yours, and they agreed, actually. So what I said to them was that I'd go back to you all, and I said that we did a first report already that we delivered to the Board of Selectmen, and they would like to have that, actually. So I don't know if Chris, if you want to email Matt Winter, he's the chair of the subcommittee, or I can do it, or any of us can, actually. But they're going to incorporate some of what we've been talking about into their report. They were very receptive to that.
Let me jump right in on that. So I think we have presented our recommendation, and again, I want to keep in focus the tiers of hierarchy. So we're a subcommittee, and we have reported and actually given our report of recommendations with respect to DOT and signage. Some of the stuff that we put on it likely is more of a wish list when it comes to DOT and what they decide on that. So it would be, I think, maybe a little bit jumping the gun for POCD to start to incorporate things that have not been filtered or even approved or even talked and discussed about on the Board of Selectmen level. So I'd be reluctant to pass that on, number one.
Okay.
Number two, to that point, has the Board of Selectmen actually acted on any of the components and points that we brought up with respect to recommendation on DOT, i.e., I think the easiest one we thought the softball was to order those signs, the pylons, and figure out a manner in which who was going to man them and the hours in which they were going to be put in. But beyond those easier issues, were they able to secure a meeting with DOT, vis-a-vis the sidewalk development? Do you have any update on that, Glenn?
The only update I have is that many of these issues I was going to bring up in today's Board of Selectmen meeting, but for a variety of reasons, I think it didn't happen today. So the agenda didn't go up in time. So I was hoping to actually have answers to all those questions for you tonight after today's 4 o'clock meeting, but didn't happen. So that meeting will be, I believe, next Thursday at 4 o'clock.
Okay, but don't you guys have a standing line item? We're on the agenda, I believe, are we not? Noise and traffic?
Yes, you have. Yes,
Okay.
you have been. Yeah.
So that's where you can take the opportunity to say, I'd like to act on it, and not to push you too hard, but you can, as a selectman, put forward a motion to just buy those damn things.
Yep.
And put forward a motion to say, this is how I'd like to see it. Let's discuss how we're going to man it, if you will, or person it.
As long as we have a meeting, I will do those things.
Okay, I don't mean to push you, but you're our conduit.
That's okay. No,
So I also think, to your point, and I'll let you get back to the POCD, but I think to your point is, if you can get the rest of the board in agreement, that's when you kick it over to POCD with your guys' stamp of approval.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So what else was in that you found?
No, and then just in general, just a general concept. There was, it was low on, with the survey with the town, but some people brought up the fact that, to some degree, the river Houstonic is kind of landlocked, in the sense that there's not a whole lot of access publicly, just to view the river, shall we say? And it came up that maybe it's, at some point, some juncture, at some point in town here, that we could have some kind of just access where people can just look at the river. And I had never really thought about that before. What I thought was, and I said this in the meeting, was that if if there were a kind of small park or something where people could walk from town to see the river, would that not maybe lessen the traffic either at the falls or at Bulls Bridge a little bit? Like maybe we can get more gravity here in town, just regarding the river. I mean, those who want to see waterfalls will still gravitate to each end of town. But it was just an idea that I never thought of before. That if more people could enjoy, could buy a lunch and then walk to the river here, would that keep Trooper Fisher here in town more often than at the falls or at Bulls Bridge? It was just, I just thought of the town differently. That was just one example of thinking of things differently. But I did mention our committee in that in that meeting, and they appreciated the input and all the work that we're doing. So
And was there any dovetailing with sidewalks?
yes, oh yes, no, there was a lot of the sidewalks is definitely in here. Nothing new that we don't know about. Yeah, there's pavement deterioration. There's a curve here I'm looking at. Actually, that's for the roadways. But no, the streetscape is in here as well.
And putting your selectman's hat back on, do you have any update as to where we are with that process?
With the POCD?
No, with the sidewalks.
Oh, with the sidewalks. The only thing I know is that materials were a little bit backlogged. I mentioned this at the last meeting. I asked when
The curbing, yeah.
When are we going to start? And there wasn't a definitive at that point. So a lot of people have asked me when that is that starting. So
but we did hire a firm, did we not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that firm has not given us a timetable yet, or have they?
I think they did initially, but the last meeting I was at, they were still looking at getting some materials. So again, I would have had a more definitive answer today.
Right.
Okay. But then the other thing, just to throw out this, because I think we talked about again enforcement and how much would another trooper be versus an officer versus part-time. One of the things I've been doing as a board of selectmen and also as actually part of this group is just looking at town budgets. So I've looked at a lot of other towns' budgets through the years, how much they spend on enforcement and officers, in fact. So I don't know all the data certainly, but I do know that of the 8 towns I looked at, including Kent, I looked at Cornwall, Sharon, Sherman, Warren, Goshen, Washington. And it seems that for a full-time trooper, it fluctuates between 140,000 and 200,000. I thought that in itself was interesting. That's quite a big number. But between 140 and 200 is for a resident trooper. What I did find in Washington, because I do know that they have these constables or officers, they call them. I believe there's 2. It didn't say that in the budget, but I believe that's what I've been told. The total amount this coming year for 2 officers is 152,000. And if there are 2 of them, I'm assuming that's 76,000 each. Again, an assumption, but having officers are definitely more cost effective than a full-on trooper. And I think that's year round, that's 76,000. But if we are thinking, if it's even possible to have just help on the weekends with a constable program, that might be less than 76,000. And having spoken to Andrew, I did see him recently, and he did mention that there has been talk at the Board of Ed level about getting an SRO, right, a school resource officer, and if they were successful in getting an SRO, what would that mean for the town? What would that mean for Andrew? So, could we make that part of all of this somehow? I think that's a question worth pursuing. So that's what I've discovered. I don't know anything more than that. I haven't talked to any Board of Ed members, other than, I just talked to Andrew, but he did tell me that is, that talk is in the air.
Mhm. Well, while I appreciate the Board of Education and their concerns with safety, I don't know, that tie-in may be something later, but I think we need to stay focused on our opportunities to recommend to the selectmen. And I think next step should be to specifically find out what a budgetary cost, and I appreciate you looking through those other ones, something that we can just sort of dig our teeth into. It doesn't have to be exact, but if we're going to pick a number that we can put forward, I think that would be, be able to give them brackets, the Board of Selectmen. The other thing I think let's all four of us decide right now is what is the time commitment we're actually seeking from a secondary officer, if indeed we decide to go that route. Do you know what I mean? I guess maybe it's not even to look at that. Would we all agree that we just need it from April to November? Do we need it all year round?
You got a
Downtown?
couple, I'm wondering, do you have overlap? In other words, do you have overlap with a schedule on the part of the, we'll call them, for lack of a better term, the primary officer, and do we overlap with another officer, or do we spread it out? Those are some of the things that you'd want to consider.
Mm-hmm. So to follow up on that, Ira, you're talking overlap being like, I'm going to make it up, Camo weekend,
Right.
where there's so much traffic in town,
Two, you'd want
and it's a beautiful autumn day, and you have the primary person on duty, but then you also have the secondary on duty, maybe
yeah,
running up and down the end of the not only outside, but the village itself, versus a regular autumn day where maybe you just have the officer and the primary doesn't need to be there.
right.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's not rocket science to say, the time of year that you've identified and kind of Friday to Sunday is, where I would see the most utility.
Yep, agreed. Andrea, do you have thoughts on that?
I think that what did we talk about last time was something like 40 extra days or something. So it's the
Yep.
weekends times 20 weekends, whatever it was, 25, what do you say, 25 weekends is half the year, and then it was 2 weekend days, so 50 extra days.
Yep.
So whatever that comes up with, but I think you're right, having the overlap there where that, like I was saying, where we know for sure we have weekend coverage, and if our main person is on that rolling 5 days on, 3 days off, or whatever the trooper thing is, then when we have multiple officers, and we have multiple officers, but always knowing that we have a weekend coverage makes sense.
So we have to work on the math on that, but it turns out over the past years that Friday is as, if not busier than some Saturdays. So you'd want to really look hard at what days you're including. I got to believe that you'd want all 3 days. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you just do, and of course, it's not going to follow the lines of simple math, but
Right. Exactly.
if you got $75,000 for an officer in Washington, as an example, if that is an accurate number, then you're looking at half of that is what, $36,000 roughly, right? So 36.5. So that's what you're looking at theoretically with an officer, if indeed we are going to go to that kind of plan. And so knowing that not all math works that way, let's budget $45,000, let's just say, a year. And Glenn, if you can just sort of run that by Andrew,
Yeah,
and
Mhm.
maybe that's a solution and maybe it isn't. Because Andrew and I, when we spoke, we talked about officers. We also talked about just hiring off-duty officers or retired officers. And if you could maybe ask him about that and get a figure for just those 25 or 50 days. What was it, 50 days? Yeah, we were
Days.
talking about.
Yeah. Mhm.
It might be as high as 84 days. If you've
Yeah,
got,
and again, we're talking ballpark because what
okay,
would have to happen is the Board of Selectmen agreed that we needed more coverage.
yeah,
Then they would just have to go and figure out the budgeting on their own. But what we don't want to do is say, yeah, we don't know what it is. And turns out the Board of Select set them up for a $200,000 bill, which would never pass, right? So
correct.
I think we have to have some sort of prudence in mind and some sort of thought to give them on our best guesstimates. So Glenn, if you could get that, that would be great.
Yep.
So we've talked about timing and additional funding and additional coverage. Are there any other thoughts of, we've talked about rumble strips being a help, any other help besides, I think we've thrown technology out, correct, Andrea?
Yes. There is a legality question as far as like due process too.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's that.
Mhm.
But I mean, I thought it was a good idea as far as like, if they're saying like, we don't want to have person to person confrontation, I
Yep.
thought, well, take the people out, but that is not supported by the ability to sort of like say, what are you stopping me for? Because
Right, to back it up. So,
you can't get stopped by a camera.
yep.
Well, the issue in public policy is what they're finding around cameras is that it doesn't have so much of a chilling effect in an area like us, which is pretty random. If you live in, say, a metropolitan area like New York City that tells you there are speed cameras, there are red light cameras, and there are lots of them, then people in general are affected by that. But they're not thinking about it here. So while we get lots of violators, we miss out on the prevention, which is what we're trying to do.
Right.
Yeah, and the education purpose, I think what you're touching on too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
They expect it in certain areas. In fact, you'll see in many areas in DC recently, I saw at the traffic light, probably at 30 or 40 of them, it says that there's a camera here. And so, the repetition of that must have some chilling effect, but just as a random act, 1 or 2 cameras at 1 or 2 intersections at a town of 2,575 miles from New York City probably doesn't prevent anything.
Right. I don't know about you guys, but I can hear somebody screaming up 341.
Yep.
Here's a question. We just had 4th of July weekend. What did you all think of it? I was driving up and down Route 7. I was checking things out. I mean, was it any, did you think it was any more traffic than usual, less, about the same?
On the 4th, there was less traffic, I
That's what I
found, and I think that's a function of people going to parties.
Yep.
I mean,
They
I
were
went to the IGA and the whole hot dog aisle was wiped out, and the watermelons. So I think it's basically people went to parties, but the rest of the weekend seemed quite heavy.
So the traffic in aisle 3 was pretty light.
We needed no Andrew there.
Okay.
So I don't think the 4th of July is really an indicative holiday. I think you're talking about some of the other days. Sidewalk sale days in August are going to be, if it's a good day, will be packed. And maybe that's what we do, because Andrew recommended, as I think I had mentioned to you guys before, only doing it on a Saturday and not on a Sunday, which, he knows, he sees the traffic flow. So maybe we can even all be mindful of watching Saturday, Sundays and see what we think.
So Chris,
but I think
to the rest of you, it's almost all weather dependent.
It is almost all weather dependent.
Really, really, and it's interesting because it has to do, and you can ask Gary Davis or any other retailer who thinks about traffic flow, and that is that the buildup on the weather is really what people look at. So on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or even Friday, and you can have an amazingly busy time, even if it just rains like crazy on Saturday, if your buildup was for good weather. And the inverse, of course, is also true. If the forecast is for lots of rain and you have one of these beautiful days, your traffic invariably is light because it was affected by that. So I think that's an important piece to consider.
Yeah, I guess that would, I don't know how to anticipate that and put that on a schedule for
Right.
somebody who's marked their day off
And
as
for
a
Tina,
retired
too,
trooper saying, I'm going to mark my day off and make some hours. And then Kent calls him and says, sorry, it's raining.
Right. Right. Well, that we can't do.
So I think I think we have to be committed to the goal of having more than the patrolling that we have here. And I think that's two-pronged. The first is through, as we've said, and the contractual obligation with the troop to mandate it and require it as a contract element. And number two, if that is not sufficient enough, to have some additional support for that resident trooper, whomever he or she may be, on the busier times. I think those are the two components that we need to work with. And if we can get some fairly good idea of cost, we can pass that along to Board of Selectmen, and then they can run with it as they see fit.
So I think the challenge, Glenn, to go back to what you were talking about, looking at other towns, is to understand what are the possible configurations of staffing, and of course the resulting cost. That's where you want to know what are the different types of pieces you can fit together.
Yep.
Because it sounds like, and I think we all know from experience, there are different ways to do this. So I think understanding what the configuration is based on what type of enforcement person you get is what's going to drive your budget dollar.
Yep.
So that might be something if you could get back to us on to understand. Now, there is typically there's a sergeant at the troop that the residents all report to. Actually, I don't know his rank, but there's typically someone who manages the resident program. So he might be a place to start, along with Andrew, of course, who would have a lot of knowledge.
Good.
So again, Ira, it's from a subcommittee point of view, we don't really have a lot of rank, if you will, in being able to call up the troop and say, hey, I'm working on a subcommittee and blah, blah, blah. So I think if you can probably use Andrew as just your sense of
I gotcha.
Of structure, Glenn, that will just go a long way, because we want the trooper's input. We want to know how we can support him or her.
Absolutely.
Long term. What we also are going to ask for is that we get the dollar worth from the trooper program. But I think it's pretty clear that it would be whether the system of going north to Kent Falls and south to Bulls Bridge is appropriate. I hope that the Board of Selectmen will have a voice in being able to shape some of that. But moreover, we have an enforcement issue no matter what, because if whomever's on duty has to be pulled away from the center and it happens to be the busiest day of the year, we still need to have somebody there. So I think and you guys can argue it all through with me, but I'm convinced that we need to have a dedicated downtown individual for a certain period of time.
I agree.
Who most likely will report to the resident trooper, who will obviously report up the chain of command. But I also, and I'm just thinking this off the cuff, with respect to just simply enforcement of the items that we're talking about, it would be good for the Board of Selectmen to get feedback on that, i.e. a report on a, after a whole cycle of what incidences they dealt with, how did they deal with it? Because it could be that we need 2, or it could be that we only need a half, or it could be that we don't need it at all, or it could be if we use implemented some other way, we might be able to get away with what we're trying to achieve. Or it could be that, they pulled over so many people that everybody driving through Kent now knows you don't speed through Kent. Ira talks about a town down in southern Fairfield County, and I know there are a few in Massachusetts that I lived in. You
Woodbridge.
did not go through that speeding because you would definitely get nailed.
You drove around it.
Yep, you drove into another town. In fact, I know people that don't go through New York State to get to Sharon anymore.
Right, yeah, because of the way the trooper likes to sit there. By the
They
way,
see that nice Connecticut
he
plate.
lives on that road. He lives on that road.
So, in any event, I think that's good. So, anyone else have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, or direction that we want to try to turn
So
to?
trying to find out what kind of activity we've had, and that'll allow us to maybe make recommendations on the shape we think that enforcement might want to take.
Mhm. All right, so in wrapping up, Glenn, you'll go over and find out about the officer program that was saying, and maybe working with Andrew to figure out budgeting on that, rough budgeting, picking up on a couple of other towns, as you've said, and maybe with Andrew as to how he might be able to see involving somebody that way in the downtown. I'll work on the interfacing with the businesses, the service providers, and the schools in terms of getting their communication to us. Ira, you're going to grab the noise ordinances.
Regs and applications of other towns, if any.
And Andrea?
The noise ordinances that Ira found statewide are already in our shared folder, just
Right, I remember
FYI.
seeing those. So I guess it's a matter of seeing what other towns are doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if Ira, do you have that link where you can dump stuff up onto that?
I will.
All right, that would be good. Not only the ordinances or anything you can find locally, how other towns deal with that would be helpful. And I think Andrea, you and Ira can probably work together on that. And I think I'm going to be away next Thursday, so I'd say let's bump our meeting to how's that run into that other meeting here?
That's the selectmen meeting is on the 21st.
The nighttime selectmen meeting is the 21st.
Mhm.
That's accurate, Glenn?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay, why don't we then convene on the 28th?
Okay.
And like our last charge in terms of DOT, let's see if by the 28th we can't really fill in all of that data on the sheet that I put up, the sort of the template, and with a hope of wrapping this up maybe the first week in August, if we can, or the second week. I know I'm away. I can't remember what days I'm away. Let's see, probably sometime in August. So, but with the intent to try to get this thing wrapped up by summertime and to the selectmen for specific, these are the enforcement concepts that we have. That makes sense.
Okay, I have a couple clarifications from the beginning of the meeting because I was late. What time did you call the meeting to order?
7:34, I believe.
7:30.
Okay. And did you guys meet last week when I was gone?
We did not.
No.
Okay, so did you guys accept the minutes from the June 23rd meeting?
We did.
Tonight, yes.
Okay. Okay, so who do you remember who did the motion? And
I made the motion,
okay, Chris made the motion and
and it was
seconded.
all was in favor.
Okay. Okay, seconded by Glenn.
Glenn.
Ira. Okay. All right, awesome, thank you. That means I can get these minutes to Darlene sooner than waiting to watch the recording.
Excellent. Thank you, and Andrea.
Okay, you're welcome. And I think that's all all the questions I have. Sorry, traveling with a toddler is exhausting. We're a little worn out.
Yeah, that's why I decided not to have any more toddlers. No more toddlers.
You could borrow mine if you want. If you
Lend
weren't
lease
sure
act,
about
huh?
it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that, those charges, everybody's good. Let's plan on the 28th, see if we can't get this thing at least in some sort of good shape. And then Glenn, again, if I can ask of you to see if we can't get some cones, because we're now in the thick of summer. And that would really be good to have, I think. And I think that I know your challenge is not going to be the cones. Your challenge is going to be staffing them.
Yes.
And I think, and what we want to avoid, and I'll reiterate, when I was on the board, the biggest concern was Ira in his civic mindedness would drag them out in the morning because John Lindsay, either wasn't there or was off, or, whomever was the one that was covering. And then he would drag them in the afternoon, and God forbid somebody who's a public citizen get hit by a car while doing that. That would be a big problem for the town of Connecticut.
Yep. Mhm.
So we really need to make it official, and we want the selectmen to codify that so that they really have somebody doing that and really mindful of it. If one breaks, we need to buy another one. That's just what we got to do. So if you can press your cohorts
I'll
into
bring it
doing
up.
that,
I
that
will
would be
bring it up.
great. And then we'll feel like we've accomplished something.
I think that's a good point, though, that we don't have to have them like tackle our entire report. They can
Nope.
piecemeal it. Like we can get the cone what are they called? Bollards? We can
Bowling
get
pins.
those. Yeah. Did you guys get my my video of the flashing lights in St. Augustine?
Yes,
I did.
riveting.
So I did not take a video of using the flags on A1A Beach, but the lights that I took the video of, that is on the busiest, crazy, same thing we have, one lane each direction with on street parking and crosswalks that are very difficult to see, but they got flashing lights that you press, and so it tells the cars that pedestrians are in the crosswalk.
Yeah, and as Catherine Backrack pointed out, that in Lakeville, they had worked very hard to get the big flashing lights.
Yeah.
And they seem pretty effective. The other thing they have is those curbs that go right into the road,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But yes, appreciate that. And
just doing research on vacation.
I think it's work. I think it's, what, extra pay for you on that one.
Yeah.
Double your pay, actually, I think, is what we're
Yeah,
doing.
we're gonna double that pay of yours. Oh my goodness. All right, so everybody enjoy these nice summer days, and we will convene on the 28th, and appreciate all your help and work and energy.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Bye.
Goodbye.